Can I tell you about one of my favorite things? One of my biggest red pill moments? I think I got my pill straight now. Red's the one where you change. That I had in accounting. What actually made me an even bigger fan of running an accounting practice? My background was in tax. Parsers. Yeah, no, nerd alert. I know, but here's the thing. Like 98% of the people that I know still have not dabbled with parsers. So I'm going to talk about it a little bit today, just how easy it is, how we built like some cool passive revenue opportunities around parsers, and how I think it makes email a little more manageable because, buddy, our inboxes these days, just a big old stinky hot mess of machine-generated robot emails that are cold and heartless and I don't need to respond to, but then somewhere buried in there is something important that I should probably read. So let's talk about it. Parsers! Today on Jason Daly. So I wanted to talk about parsing because I feel like it is one of those standout things that the highest output people I know fundamentally think about in a different way. And I know for me, I had always kind of understood it from a conceptual standpoint, but for whatever reason, like many things in life, didn't actually like take the plunge. Or it felt like a plunge, like it felt like this big new thing I was going to have to learn, so I just never bit that off. When in reality, it was like in 5 minutes, I had my head around it. And it was one of the biggest like red pill moments in virtually anything I'd ever done. And it was probably early no-code-y kind of times, maybe 3 or 4 years ago when I first saw a parsing tool that was like, where I was like, wait a minute, you can super easily extract data from these awful emails I'm getting, these awful documents that we have to process on a recurring basis. And I think this has just become a more relevant conversation as more of the communications that we're dealing with every single day are machine generated and transactional. And, now even AI-based stuff is making this even worse. So it's like there was a time when email was this really fun new thing. And when you got an email, it was a big deal because somebody took the time to like sit down and hammer out this email to you. And it just feels like we are so far past that to where now email is just, for many of us, the most stress-inducing part of our work. But I would venture to guess that for many of us in accounting firms, a lot of this is accounting specific, 80+% of the emails that we receive are not from humans, they're transactional. And a huge percentage of those are recurring transactional emails. So just by nature of like doing business these days and using services, we are building up this sort of like sawdust, this kind of like byproduct of just going through our days and doing work that is this mountain, this growing mountain of email that's not one-off stuff, it's recurring stuff. It's like creating this new floor of work. And for many people, the solution is then for the email inbox to become the file system because they just don't want to wade through that ridiculous volume of stuff. It's a mess. It's, billing notifications are the easy example. The receipt for the recurring monthly charge, that sort of thing. But the other things that we encounter a lot is stuff like, apps that don't give you meaningful controls over your notifications, where there are some specific types, some specific scenarios where you want a notification, but you can't pare it down to just that. And so instead you have to leave it on in case that situation ever comes up. And there's so many apps that do this. I mean, Bill.com is a good example. ClickUp, holy smokes, I always struggled with this with ClickUp. There's certain situations where I want a notification, but a whole lot of notifications where I don't. And oftentimes what we do is we opt into everything in order to cover the exception. And it just makes the email problem worse. So let's just cruise real quick through how parsing tools work, because the more interesting conversation I think is then on the other side of that. How does that change how you approach work? How does that change how your team approaches the work that they do for clients, and how you can even build like new revenue streams around parsing, which was one of the most fun projects I ever did. So parsing tools, I shared my current favorite in my newsletter last week. That's a weekly newsletter. You can subscribe at newsletter.jason.cpa. My current favorite is a tool called Parsio. And why I like it is it will do both documents and emails. So I can use a single tool for both. Because with all these transactional emails we get, everybody seems to like to do these transactional emails a little bit differently. Some of them put that thing that you need in the body of the email. Some of them put it in an attachment to an email. Some of them put it in a link that's inside the body of the email that takes you out to a web page. Oh, those people. Oftentimes you even get like multiple attachments. And so you're like, oh, what do? Do I combine all of these? But all of these different flavors and delivery methods like fundamentally just end up creating a whole bunch of human work, especially when you're doing stuff for clients. It is one thing to have your own dumpster fire that's a mess and you just let it pile up and you're like, man, I'll go back and find it if I ever need it. It's another thing when it's a client's. And anytime I talk about parsers, usually people go to like, oh, what about Dext and stuff like that. So Dext is like a solution for bookkeepers for handling, huge volumes of receipts and stuff like that, and extracting the information and pushing it into the accounting system and stuff like that. And those systems are great. And in the biggest, most complex situations, I do use those. But inevitably, there's a whole ton of situations where those end up being overkill. Or for whatever reason, they won't quite do what I need. That's half of it. The other half of it is that's only really parsing of financial stuff. There's a lot of emails that we get that are not financial in any way. They're error notifications or status updates, stuff that I still need to be aware of, stuff that maybe my colleague needs to know about, that have nothing to do with financial stuff. And there's a lot of great parsing applications for those non-financial things also, because many times, like, email is this fallback communication channel for it's kind of a catch-all for anything where there isn't another place for it. Like, if you've got a bill pay platform where you approve bills, you shouldn't be emailing that person to approve it. It all goes through the bill pay platform, right? And so like email becomes this catch-all for a whole bunch of things, a lot of things that are actually like disguised approvals where there's no other place to do this approval. And so it's not just financial stuff. There's a lot of things that we get in there that are non-financial that something like a Dext wouldn't handle for you. So there's still value to me in learning parsing for all those sort of peripheral things that it won't handle. But the way Parsio works, and this is consistent with all the parsing tools that I used, you set up mailboxes basically, or individual parsers. And each of these parsers, you create kind of a methodology around how you want them to pull details out of that document or out of that email. So maybe it's a specific field that you want from it. Maybe on that receipt email that you get every single month, you want the last four of the card, so you know what card it came from. You want the dollar amount and you want the transaction date. And then maybe you want to turn it into a PDF so that you can save it to a file system or something like that. But for any given type of thing, there's certain details that you want to pull from it. And so you're generally creating a parser, or Parsio calls it a mailbox, for each of those different types of things. And this is where people get stuck sometimes, and they're like, okay, if I get 60 different recurring emails in this inbox every single month, you're telling me I have to set this up 60 times? And the answer is yes, But I also think we really quickly lose perspective of you're already doing all of this work. Like you already do this every single month, and it will never go away for you or your team until you automate it. And so the great thing about like Parsio to me is like setting that thing up now is like less than a 5-minute process. It's very simple to set up new mailboxes, to automate that however you want to. But also it is one of the things with automation is as you set that stuff up for yourself over time, you lose perspective of the things that you've automated that you don't have to do anymore. Like we have like 20/20 vision on like the things that we do, like what our day-to-day looks like, but often lose perspective of the things that we no longer have to do. And it's why in change management, when you go to, a new software or something like that, people will always complain about what their work is now, even if it means there's all these other things that they hated to do before that they no longer have to do. Like that's just whatever, that's just human nature. But just like over the course of doing business, and whether it's our clients, stuff that we're managing for them or us, you just keep building up this floor of more and more and more and more and more things that are coming in every single month that you have to process one way or another. And when I realized just how simple it was to create a parser to handle these things for me, that was a big light bulb moment for me, because I realized not only can I create parsers to automate these things for me so that they just happen and so that I don't have to be hands-on a specific time every month, send this to Tina or put this in the accounting system or something like that, but we could do this for our clients because everybody has this issue. Every business has this issue. And this is a great example of like a problem that your client has that you can build a passive solution for. And they're none the wiser. I mean, it doesn't really matter how it gets done. I can't tell you how many situations where we came in working with a client, we're doing back office stuff for them, and there's other kind of people in the orgs doing peripheral sort of back office functions, and a third of this person's job is logging into this system or processing these things every day, and they're kind of these adjacent tasks to what you do where you're like, oh, we need somebody to do this other thing that a human actually needs to do. Is that something that Jim could do? Well, no, he's tied up with these other things. How about this? Why don't we take over these responsibilities that Jim's doing now so that he can do this more meaningful thing? And before you know it, we've slid into this kind of administrative processing thing where we're able to, increase the engagement by several $1,000s a month. And it's something that over the course of 3 to 6 months, we'll automate, 90% of it through tools like this. And some of those projects went on to be our most profitable projects because we were able to put the normal work kind of alongside this other back office support work. And it's actually what I loved about building an accounting practice was all the other stuff we got to do that was adjacent to the accounting where we could be really helpful. And all those things actually made us better at the accounting too, because we could feed all that stuff back into the accounting system. This episode is sponsored in part by LiveFlow. Let me tell you about LiveFlow, okay? LiveFlow is a powerful product that puts your advanced reporting on autopilot. You know what that means? Autopilot means you set it up and it just goes. The software is designed to simplify the process of creating reports by turning your spreadsheet into a scalable and real-time FP&A platform, buddy. This means that you can spend less time manually updating spreadsheets. That's a win. And more time analyzing the data and advising your clients. One of the key benefits of LiveFlow is its ability to automate the process of streamlining reports from QuickBooks. This means you can easily import all your client financial data into Google Sheets, where it can be transformed into a fully customizable thing that can be tailored to meet any of your needs, you little snowflakes. Even do like cool consolidations, custom dashboards, all that stuff. Anything that's in that QuickBooks file, you sync it back and forth, bada boom, bada bang. LiveFlow is going to do it for you, bud. Learn more, check out the link in the video description, the show notes. Check out the link. This episode is brought to you in part by Meester & Company, who is hiring a CAS manager. You can put job listings on this podcast. Yep. Meester & Company is a firm in Northern California. They're hiring a remote CAS manager teeny bit of travel required, but you can generally be anywhere. Let me tell you why Meester and Company is better than the firm that you work for right now, buddy. Okay, listen up. A few reasons. Our team is top priority, not revenue. We concentrate on our strengths and aren't afraid to turn down the wrong clients or projects. Our firm's success starts with our team members. You sold yet? We believe in work-life balance. They probably won't have you running a daily show. No billable hours or timesheets. We focus on results. They specialize in tax, accounting, and advisory engagements. Steer clear of audit and attest work, because who the heck wants to do that? It is a modern, forward-looking firm that is building out their CAS practice, and you just might be the perfect person to help them do that. Let's just zoom out. Of all the firms you could go work for, the firm that's advertising on this silly little podcast, how many people listen to this? Oh, not very many. So if you're looking for something new in the CAS space, check out this job listing, put it in the show notes. You never know. It could be the job of your dreams. It takes what is like a really frustrating and dumb interface, email. Like email's like the dumping ground for like all of the notifications that they have to send you, but they don't have a better way to send it to you. Like you get all these emails and you're like, boy, I sure wish all these things just went straight into this other system or the accounting system or, or file storage or something like that, but they don't. And so then your email becomes like this sort of like, I don't know, approval, like human intervention step where it's virtually never the destination for that thing that just came into your email, but ultimately requires you to do something with it to get it to the destination. So it's like a fundamentally broken part of the process because a human has to come in and then process that thing each time. But email parsers and document parsers make it so that when you set that parser up once, any future instance of that thing that comes through gets handled on an automated basis. And so you're probably setting up like an email rule to forward those future messages to, the Parsio mailbox or wherever that thing's getting processed as soon as it hits. So it comes in, gets forwarded there, gets parsed by Parsio. And then after that, you decide, where do you want that to go? Do you want that to go to Zapier, get saved to, your file system or Airtable or something like that? But the upshot is all the future times that email comes in, I set my stuff to auto archive after it's been like forwarded to a parsing service like that, and I never have to look at that thing again. And when you start thinking about email that way, you realize email is actually like this kind of interface that you can build all sorts of automations around. So you think of all of the services that we use that don't have an API and don't integrate from app A to app B quite the way that you want it to. So when you have these apps that don't integrate, like what is the interface that almost all of them share? It's email. There's almost always a way to get that information out of the app via email, via their notifications that they love to send you that are just like so wildly overkill. And so when you're struggling with these apps that don't quite integrate the way that you want, oftentimes a way to build your own integrations is just find some way to get that data out of the system via email and then use a parser to grab it and take it wherever you want to go. So think about the apps that you use right now. And it's probably going to be easy to think of a few situations where there's this app that doesn't give you the information that you want, and you would love to be notified as soon as a certain thing happens, or whenever a certain thing happens, take it over to another app automatically. But right now it doesn't do that. So you've got this like recurring task and somebody has to do that for you, or you have to hop in and do it. That stuff is super common. It's really annoying. A huge part of our jobs right now, unfortunately, is still moving data from A to B. They told us the cloud would solve this. It hasn't yet. It's gotten better in some ways. But think about an example like that. And then in the source app, in the app where that thing originally happens, take a look and see. And oftentimes we don't have like emails enabled for this stuff because then it just becomes an absolute fire hose and we never pay attention to it. But take a look and see. Is there a type of email that you can get out of the system that will give you that information that you can then go do something with it elsewhere? an example of like the ways I've used this is with ClickUp and the fact that it gives you like no granularity over the type of email notifications that you get. But even in my case, it was still fiddly. It was like, oh, I actually only really want to get notifications for these few time-sensitive things that come through a couple times a week from like a specific client project or something like that. And so ultimately, like there was probably never going to be a version of their settings that would ever support exactly my use case. But what I could do was turn on an email notification setting that would send me email notifications, a lot of them, but among them would be the couple that I wanted. So I would enable that setting. I would automatically archive those things as they came in, unless they included that specific scenario that I wanted to handle, at which point I could kick off, whatever automation after that I wanted to, or even just let that notification come through to me and then automatically archive all the other ones. So oftentimes you can turn on this bigger fire hose than you actually want and use parsers or email inbox rules to selectively keep just the ones that you actually need. And so going back to the systems that don't otherwise integrate, when QuickBooks will send scheduled reports, for example, over email. What can you do with those scheduled reports like that? Like how else are you going to get a report out of a QuickBooks file on an automated basis, right? Like it takes third-party tools, takes doing something with the API. That's an example of something that can be like scheduled to automatically run over email. That is something that you couldn't otherwise get. I did this a lot with Bill.com emails. Bill.com, they have an API, but they only use it with their little kind of partnership other software companies that they will build stuff with. So I can't actually use it, but they send out a daily email if you want that has a shocking amount of information in it, like more than anybody would ever actually want to see every single day. And I can use that over communication to, in an automated way, selectively pull out just the things that I want. This episode is sponsored in part by Client Hub. This week on Tales from the Hub, yeah, that's a thing. Let's talk about a firm. This firm is called Super Smart Accounting Solutions. They realized profitability of their firm comes down to how efficiently they can get responses from clients. That old chestnut. So they prioritized a practice management platform that would make their client experience so good that the clients would just be foaming at the mouth to get them answers as quickly as possible. Client Hub, hey, buddy, it was the obvious choice. Practice management with an amazing client portal at its core. The fine people at Super Smart Accounting Solutions, this isn't fictional. They love the idea of a system that is boundaryless. Clients are users just like the staff are users. And the client portal's like the core of the product. It's not just this afterthought sort of bolt-on thing, right? Client Hub, let me tell you, blew their minds. They loved it. They adopted it. Super easy. They had that sucker going in a week. A week! When's the last time you changed practice management systems in a week? That's Tales from the Hub. We'll be back with more tales next week. Check out Client Hub at the link in the show notes. Video description, one of those. Some other examples of just like little fiddly ways we've used this. So Payroll Systems sends you a payroll confirmation when you run payroll, say Gusto or something like that, and it gives you a few amounts of what all's happening there. Sometimes clients want to know when that's coming up. Like when is that money going to come out of the bank and how much is it going to be? Generally, we didn't give clients direct access to the payroll system because we didn't want them fiddling with stuff. So we would actually parse those payroll confirmations and forward we would extract the information from those confirmation emails and then use that information to send a branded email to them to say, hey, Jim, just a heads up, this is an automated email. This amount of money is going to come out, on X date. And so oftentimes we would set that up so the clients would be notified and it didn't require this additional task in the project to say, oh yeah, send this email to Jim when the payroll's actually been run. We use this a lot with ShareFile. Also, we had people with their own ShareFile upload folders and it became this manual process where when a team member got notified, they had to go out and download the thing and then take it to this other place. We did quite a bit with that. I got a number of things where I didn't really like the email would come to me, but it ultimately had to go to somebody else. I had some stuff that would then like post to Slack in certain situations. If it was something that a member of my team needed to be notified of and I didn't want to fuss with it. But that situation even was one of those things where like 1 in every 10 times they would need to be notified based on some of the specifics of the email. So like even in non-financial situations, like you can parse out whatever that important sort of variable within the email is that will dictate a follow-on decision. Set that stuff up once to automatically be handled the way that you want so you don't have to fuss with it going forward. Now, when you're figuring this stuff out, it starts with you, but this is a great example of how an investment that you make in yourself can absolutely be 10x'd if it's something that your team learns as well. I think oftentimes we make these unlocks ourselves that are then hard to like multiply the benefit of across your team. But if you are doing this sort of thing and it's making you much more productive, man, you got to find a way to upskill the team on this stuff also. Now, what ultimately got me most excited about learning this stuff and getting better at it was the fact that this is not just a me problem. This is like a state of work today problem. It is an everybody problem that I can provide a solution for. And so we actually had like named services that we would offer clients and upsell them on. And the way we sort of settled on doing this was the best practice we communicated with clients was we would work with them to set up like an accounting at their domain email address. And whenever they sign up for services, whenever they're going to get email confirmations, receipts, and that sort of thing, point all that stuff to the accounting email address so that everything isn't always blocked by whoever signed up for it, like it's not all in the business owner name, that sort of thing. And we would incentivize them to do this by basically managing the information that would come into that inbox for them. And so it inevitably would be some work to switch this stuff over, but they only had to do that work as long as they hadn't switched it over. So it's kind of like a built-in incentive for them to switch those accounts and the notifications to go to the correct destination. Now, like alone, that's a big step forward because you have like that email inbox would become oftentimes the most organized file cabinet they had, because it was one place that you could find that stuff going forward, though ultimately it shouldn't be like the final destination for most of that information. But then our team, who was super savvy at managing those inboxes and automating the stuff that runs through them, we started doing that for a bunch of people. And so we had, I don't know, in total, probably 40 plus inboxes that we were managing. And, a really good chunk of the messages that came through those email addresses were automated. And then all that was left after that was to kind of handle the exceptions. And for most people, man, like in most companies, this is somebody's job, or this is like several people. It takes up a good chunk of their time. And it was one of the easier situations to have that conversation around value. And here's what we're taking over and why you're actually going to pay us thousands of dollars more a month to do it. Because Jim isn't getting any smarter processing these emails. Like, this isn't what Tina wants to do. Like, this is not going to be something where you take it away from them and they're going to be like, oh, I missed that. Like, no, like this is actually freeing up those people to do meaningful stuff. And for us, this was actually exactly the type of work that we liked to take on because it could ultimately become passive. And so within our CAS business, the stuff I was most excited about longer term were these sort of data problems, the system issues where we could come in and be the ones to connect them and find these sort of inefficiencies in an organization that were taking up a bunch of a person's time. You can come in and say, hey, we're going to do this part of Tina's job now, and you're going to pay us effectively what you were paying her, if not more, to do that job. And on day one for us, it would be manual and there would be some stuff that we'd have to figure out. But over the course of time, we could automate more and more of that stuff that was coming through so that we were taking on projects that would start as something a human had to do, but we ultimately always had a path to making that project largely passive. And that was, well after figuring out parsers and working through what does it look like to set up a bunch of mailboxes for a specific client, and like how do you isolate that from the mailboxes you set up for other clients, and just kind of like thinking through those nuts and bolts things. That was very much the destination, but unlocked some really cool, like largely passive revenue opportunities for us, and those ended up being the backbone of some of our most profitable projects. But that's not where we started. In the beginning, for me, it was selfishly like, boy, I would love for this email inbox not to just kind of seem to like keep filling itself up every single day and creating all this meaningless work that I would really rather not do. So it started personally for me, as it should for everybody, but don't stop there. Like, get your team plugged into it, because it's something that is an unlock for each of them. So like, if you save yourself a couple hours a week, don't hide that under a bushel basket, man. Upskill the rest of your team at the same time. Okay, put the old shower caps on with me for a minute here. Had a thought, shower thought, particularly as it pertains to AI generated stuff, because the ease with which stuff can be generated with AI right now is just going to have such a big impact on the human experience. And the amount of just really low effort stuff that we're surrounded by, and how do you sift through all of this garbage text to find actual meaningful stuff that a human put thought into? We think about, email specifically. We think about AI generated email specifically through the outbound perspective and how we communicate with our clients. And so we've been talking about the work that Canopy and Carbon have done on generative email and making it easier to communicate with clients, and what a great time saver that can be. What's it gonna look like when clients are doing the reverse, when we're getting generative email from clients? We all remember the day that we got a Facebook invite from our grandmothers, and we knew that an era had just ended. And when your grandmother first posted to Facebook, it looked a lot different than the way that you and your friends posted to Facebook. And at Google I/O last week, they just announced, generative email built into Gmail. And I think they're starting with just like Google Workspace accounts. So like business Google accounts. I don't think the free Gmail gets that, but eventually that's probably a thing, right? Every email client supports generative email. So what's it going to look like for me, a responsible AI enthusiast that knows how to do things like tell it to only generate an email 3 sentences long? I give it, a length parameter because inevitably it gives me like 3 or 4 paragraphs. And nobody's got time for 3 or 4 paragraph emails these days. What's it going to look like when our clients start sending us AI generated email? And how should that make us feel about sending our clients AI generated email? I was thinking about that last night, and I don't know. I think ultimately it, like, when we first think about it, it's like, oh, it's this new thing, that is kind of ambiguous, and is it irresponsible? When ultimately at the end of the day, like, no, like, we still have to be responsible for everything that we do with AI. And so somebody generates and sends you a big long paragraph, like 3-paragraph email when it could have been a couple of sentences. That's still their fault. Don't do that. The problem is people are going to do that. And I do see a near future where our clients really irritatingly are probably sending us stuff that we don't want to read. But I think all we can do is be good citizens and leverage it responsibly. It is a time saver. You just got to do it the right way. But I do think there will very much be this reckoning of like, oh, your grandma just found generative email. And we see this now with, like, every time I do a ChatGPT talk, the comments are like anecdotes about how they sent a funny pirate poem to their friend, and they've used ChatGPT, and that's what they used it for. So it will be interesting to see what we start getting from clients when the tables are turned and they start sending us generative stuff. Again, I don't think it's not a reason for us to not use it. Because it can be used in the wrong way does not mean that we should use it in the right way. But it is kind of an unfortunate thing that I think is going to be just around the corner. So that's all I got today. We got Q&A Wednesday. Tomorrow, you got any Qs? Drop them in the comments. Tell me your experience with parsing. Is this something you've had success with? What tools have you used? What has been the best way for you to upskill your team on this stuff? If you have or have not, give us your tales of success or cautionary tales in the comments. I'll see you tomorrow.